of fantasy. You're watching fantasy, whisper stories, a place where tales come to life in the quiet of the night. And tonight, we're heading into one of the most mysterious realms of all, the world of supernatural. Get ready for shadows, ancient lore, and hunters who fear no darkness. But before we open the portal, I have a small favor to ask. Our channel is just beginning its journey, and we need your help to reach our first 1,000 subscribers. So if you enjoy stories like this, hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. Let us know in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? Now let's begin. World comes into focus slowly, like tuning an old radio station. First, the smell hits you, stale cigarette smoke mixed with gun oil, and something that might be sulfur. Then the sounds, the distant hum of highway traffic, the rattle of an ancient air conditioning unit, and somewhere underneath it all, the low murmur of voices. Your eyes flutter open to reveal a water-stained ceiling that's seen better decades. The motel room around you screams authenticity in the worst possible way, faded wallpaper peeling at the corners, carpet that's probably older than you are, and that particular brand of mustiness that only comes from years of housing desperate travelers and worse things. But it's the details that make your blood run cold. In the corner stands a weapons rack that would make a military armory jealous. Silver bullets glint in small glass containers. A shotgun leans against the wall, next to what looks like a machete, with symbols carved into the handle. Salt lines are drawn with military precision around the windows and doorframe, though someone has disturbed the line near the entrance, leaving a gap like a broken smile. On the nightstand beside you lies a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed and edges worn smooth by countless readings. The cover bears a name in faded gold lettering, John Winchester. Your heart skips. This isn't possible. This is fiction. This is, well, Sleeping Beauty's finally awake. The voice cuts through your racing thoughts like a blade through silk. You turn toward the sound and freeze. Two men stand near the bathroom door, and despite every rational part of your brain screaming that this can't be real, you recognize them instantly. In Winchester stands with his arms crossed, green eyes sharp with suspicion, and something that might be concern. He's exactly as you'd imagined, leather jacket over a flannel shirt, that cocky smirk that doesn't quite hide the wariness underneath. But there's something different too, something the screen could never capture. The weight he carries in his shoulders, the way his hand rests casually near the gun tucked into his waistband. Beside him, Sam towers with that familiar tilt of his head, hair falling across his face as he studies you with the intensity of someone trying to solve a particularly complex puzzle. His laptop is open on the small desk behind him. Multiple browser tabs, visible even from your position on the bed. Who are you? Dean continues, his voice carrying that perfect blend of authority and barely contained violence. And why are you in our room? You sit up slowly, every movement feeling surreal. The bed creaks beneath you. Even that sound is exactly right. Exactly how you'd expect a cheap motel bed to sound in this universe. Your mouth feels dry as cotton. You start, then realize you have no idea how to explain this. How do you tell someone that they're fictional characters, that you've watched their lives play out on screen for years, that you know their deepest secrets, their greatest fears? There. Cat got your tongue? Dean asks, though his tone has shifted slightly. There's less aggression now, more genuine curiosity. Look, we get it. Weird stuff happens to people in this line of work. Trust me, we've seen it all. Demon possession, time travel, alternate dimensions. Jinn dreams, Sam adds quietly, and something in his voice makes you look at him more carefully. memory manipulation, cursed objects. Catch the meaningful look that passes between the brothers and realize they're not just listing random supernatural phenomena. They're testing you, trying to gauge your reaction to specific mentions. These aren't the characters you watched on screen making casual conversation. These are hunters, professionals who have survived by being paranoid and smart. Dean takes a step closer, and you notice the way he moves, economical, balanced, ready to spring into action at the first sign of trouble. So here's how this is going to work. You're going to tell us exactly what you remember about how you got here. Start from the beginning. And if you even think about lying to us, he doesn't finish the threat, doesn't need to. The implication hangs in the air like incense. I don't know, you say finally, and it's not entirely a lie. You don't know how you got here, even if you know where here is. I remember going to sleep in my own bed, and then I woke up here. Sam frowns, fingers already moving over his laptop keyboard. What's the last thing you remember clearly? Any dreams, strange experiences, people you might have met recently? The questions feel like an interrogation, but there's genuine concern underlying them. These men have dealt with confused, frightened people before. They've seen what the supernatural world can do to innocent bystanders. I remember watching you stop yourself just in time, watching their show, watching them. That's not going to help your case. I remember watching TV, the news, something about murders in Kansas. Both brothers go very still at that. Dean's hand moves closer to his weapon. What kind of murders? Sam asks, his voice carefully neutral. Glance at the television in the corner, which is indeed murmuring about some tragic incident in a small Kansas town. The coincidence feels too perfect, too scripted. Like everything else in this room, it fits too well with your expectations of their world. I don't know the details, you say, just that they were unusual, unexplained. Dean snorts. In our line of work, unexplained usually means definitely supernatural and probably trying to kill people. He looks at Sam. What do you think? Spell work, memory charm. Possible, Sam says, but he's studying you with those intelligent eyes. But if it was a memory charm, why leave them with partial memories? And why here, specifically? The question hangs in the air, and you realize they're as confused as you are. Whatever brought you here wasn't part of their plan either. Look, you say, swinging your legs over the side of the bed. You're relieved to see you're still wearing your own clothes, though they smell faintly of ozone and something else you can't identify. I know how this sounds, but I think I might know something about what's happening in Kansas. It's a gamble, but it's the only play you have. You can't explain your real situation without sounding completely insane, but you can try to make yourself useful. In the supernatural universe, being useful to the Winchesters is the best way to stay alive. Dean raises an eyebrow. Oh, really? And how exactly would you know about a case we haven't even properly looked into yet? Before you can answer, the television volume suddenly increases, as if someone has grabbed the remote and cranked it up. All three of you turn toward the screen as the news anchor's voice fills the room with urgent authority. The seventh victim was found this morning in what police are calling the most baffling series of murders in the state's history. Each victim was found completely drained of blood, yet no wounds were visible on the bodies. Local authorities are asking for any information. The screen flickers once, twice, then goes completely black. In the sudden silence, you can hear the highway traffic again, and something else, a sound like wind chimes, though there's no wind in the sealed motel room. Sam closes his laptop slowly. Okay, he says. That's not normal. Dean Dean draws his gun in one smooth motion. Okay, whoever you are, whatever this is. But he doesn't get to finish. The lights go out, plunging the room into darkness, so complete it feels solid. And in that darkness, you hear something that makes your blood freeze. The sound of children laughing. Only there are no children here. The laughter is coming from directly behind you. Darkness in the room isn't just an absence of light. It's alive, pressing against your skin like cold water. You can't see your own hand in front of your face, but you can feel the Winchester brothers moving in the blackness with the practiced efficiency of men who have hunted things far worse than what most people can imagine. Salt Circle, Dean's voice cuts through the dark, low and controlled. Now, hear the sound of glass containers being overturned, the whisper of salt hitting carpet in precise patterns. The children's laughter grows louder, multiplying until it sounds like a playground full of phantom kids, all finding something hilarious in the dark. Exorcism est, omnis emunt spiritus. Sam's voice rises in Latin, strong and clear despite the chaos. Omnis satanica potestas, omnis incursio infernalis adversarii. New sound joins the laughter, a low, rumbling growl that seems to come from the walls themselves. The air grows colder, and your breath starts to mist in small puffs that you can barely make out in the oppressive darkness. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything stops. Lights flicker back on, revealing the three of you standing in a hastily drawn salt circle. Dean has his gun trained on the empty air, where the laughter was coming from, while Sam holds an open book, looks like some kind of exorcism manual, in one hand, and a silver knife in the other. You're pressed between them, heart hammering so hard you're sure they can hear it. Well, Dean says after a moment, not lowering his weapon, that was fun. Anyone else getting a real bad feeling about this? Sam is already moving, checking the windows, the door, examining the salt lines that were already there when you woke up. The original protective barriers are intact, he reports. Whatever that was, it didn't come through conventional means. Great, Dean mutters, because conventional supernatural entities are so much easier to deal with. You're still trying to process what just happened when something catches your eye. The leather journal, John Winchester's journal, is now open on the nightstand. You're certain it was closed before. You say, pointing at it with a shaking hand. Wasn't that closed? Both brothers turn to look, and Sam approaches the journal carefully, as if it might bite him. He peers down at the open pages, and his expression shifts from cautious to deeply concerned. Dean, he says quietly, you need to see this. Dean moves to his brother's side, keeping one eye on the room around them. When he sees what Sam is looking at, his face goes pale. That's not possible, he says. What, you ask, stepping closer despite every survival instinct telling you to stay back. What is it? Sam looks at you with an expression you can't quite read. It's an entry about you. The words hit you like a physical blow. What do you mean? Dean picks up the journal and reads aloud, his voice tight with disbelief. Day unknown, encountered individual claiming no memory of arrival. Television exhibited electromagnetic disturbance. Suspect temporal displacement or dimensional breach. Warning. Subject may be key to preventing catastrophic event in Kansas. Trust carefully, but trust. And it's signed. He pauses, swallowing hard. It's signed with Dad's signature. The room falls silent, except for the steady hum of the air conditioner and the distant traffic. Your father's been dead for years, you say without thinking, then immediately regret it when both brothers turn to stare at you with identical expressions of shock and suspicion. How do you know that? Sam asks. his voice sharp as a blade. You're in deep now, with no way to back out. I know things about you, both of you, things I shouldn't know. This is going to sound insane, but in my world, reality, you're characters in a story, a TV show. Silence that follows is so complete, you could hear a pin drop in the next county. Dean blinks slowly. You're telling us we're what, fictional? Not here, you say quickly. Here you're real, this is real. But where I come from, there's a show called Supernatural that follows your lives. Your hunts, your family, the angels, demons, the apocalypse, all of it. Sam sits down heavily in the desk chair. That's impossible. Is it, you ask? You've dealt with parallel dimensions before. Alternate realities. Metafiction. Remember the books. Chuck Shirley. Dean's gun is suddenly pointed at you again. How do you know about Chuck? Because I've seen it. I've watched you deal with him. I know about the ghost facers, about the conventions, about, you take a breath, realizing you're probably sealing your fate, but seeing no other choice. I know about everything. The demon blood, the trials, Castile, the mark of Cain, the darkness. Stop, Sam says, standing up so fast his chair rolls backward. Just stop. Dean hasn't lowered his weapon. If what you're saying is true, if you really know about all that, then you know how many times we've been lied to, manipulated. You know why we can't just trust you. I know, you say. I know about the lies, the betrayals, the deals. But I also know that you two never stop fighting for people, even when it costs you everything, even when the whole world is against you. Something in your voice seems to reach them, because Dean finally lowers his gun, though he doesn't holster it. Okay, Sam says, running his hands through his hair. Let's say we believe you. Let's say you're from some parallel reality where our lives are entertainment. The question is, why are you here now? And what does Dad's journal entry mean about you being key to preventing something catastrophic? Before you can answer, your attention is drawn to the television, which has turned itself back on. But instead of news, it's showing something impossible. Scenes from the Supernatural TV show. You watch yourself sitting in your own living room, watching the very show you're now living in. That's me, you whisper. That's my apartment. On screen, your past self reaches for the remote to turn off the TV. But just as your finger touches the button, the scene changes. Now it shows a small town that looks like it's straight out of a Western movie, but with a distinctly sinister atmosphere. Children are playing in the streets, but their laughter has that same eerie quality you heard in the darkness. Words appear across the bottom of the screen in old-fashioned script. Welcome to Providence, Kansas. Population 847, where children's laughter never dies. Image flickers and changes again. This time, it shows a woman in colonial dress, standing in what appears to be the town square. She's beautiful in an otherworldly way, with long dark hair and eyes that seem to hold ancient secrets. But as you watch, her face begins to change, aging rapidly until she's ancient and withered, then young again, cycling endlessly between youth and decay. You a writer in Eternum, her voice echoes from the speakers, speaking in perfect Latin. Et mortui nutrient vitam. The children laugh forever, and the dead shall feed life. More text appears. The harvest moon rises in 3 days. The cycle must be completed. Then the screen goes black again, and this time it stays that way. Well, that's not ominous at all, Dean says dryly. But his knuckles are white where he grips his gun. Sam is already back at his laptop, fingers flying over the keys. Providence, Kansas. Population 847. Got it. It's about 4 hours south of here. He pauses, reading from the screen. Founded in 1847 by a group of settlers led by a woman named... Oh, That's not good. What? Dean asks. Name was Evangeline Morse. According to this, she was suspected of witchcraft back in Salem, but escaped the trials. The town was founded as a sanctuary for those persecuted for their beliefs. Sam looks up from his laptop. Dean, there's more. The town has had unexplained child disappearances every 25 years like clockwork, always during the harvest moon. Always exactly 7 children. You feel a chill that has nothing to do with the air conditioning. And when was the last incident? Sam's face is grim. 25 years ago, which means the cycle's starting again, Dean finishes. He holsters his gun and starts gathering weapons from the rack. Great. Homicidal witch with a thing for kids, mysterious blood-drained bodies, and prophetic TV shows. Just another Tuesday in the Winchester family business. As he arms himself, you notice something else about John's journal. It's open to a different page now, one that wasn't there before. This page contains a detailed map of Kansas with Providence circled in red ink and notes written in the margins in what looks like multiple handwritings, as if different people had contributed to it over time. It's the drawing in the corner that makes your blood run cold. It's a symbol you recognize from the show, not from any episode you remember, but from your dreams. Dreams you'd been having for weeks before you woke up in this room. Dreams of children in colonial dress dancing around a bonfire, of a woman with shifting faces singing lullabies in a dead language, of symbols carved into trees and stone. I know that symbol, you say suddenly. Sam looks up from packing supplies. What symbol? You point to the journal. That one. I've been dreaming about it for weeks. Along with other things, children, a woman who changes faces, a town that looks exactly like what we just saw on TV. Brothers exchange, another one of those meaningful looks. Dreams can be prophetic, Sam says carefully, especially when dealing with powerful witches. They can reach across dimensions, pull people into their sphere of influence. So you think this Evangeline brought me here, you ask. But why? Dean zips up a duffel bag filled with enough weaponry to stage a small revolution. Maybe you're meant to be the 7th child. Maybe you're meant to stop her. Maybe you're just a convenient patsy. He shrugs. Only one way to find out. We're going to Providence, Sam announces, closing his laptop. Whether you're here to help or whether you're part of the problem, the answers are there. You nod, surprising yourself with your decisiveness. I'm coming with you. Like hell you are, Dean says immediately. This isn't a game. People, real people, are going to die if we don't stop this thing. And no offense, but civilian casualties are the last thing we need. I'm not a civilian, you protest. Not anymore. That witch, or whatever she is, she brought me here for a reason. Like it or not, I'm part of this now. Sam studies you thoughtfully. Actually, Dean, they might have a point. If their dreams are connected to what's happening in Providence, they could be our best source of information. And if Evangeline specifically pulled them into our reality, then they're either bait or they're the weapon, Dean finishes. Great. Just what I always wanted, a walking supernatural mystery, along for the ride. But despite his sarcasm, he tosses you a canvas bag. Fine, but if you're coming with us, you're going to need to know how to protect yourself. Salt, iron, silver amulets, basic protection against the usual suspects. As you catch the bag, your fingers brush against something cold and metallic inside. When you pull it out, it's an amulet you don't recognize, a complex knot of silver and iron with small symbols etched along the edges. But the moment you touch it, the symbols seem to glow faintly, and you hear a whisper in your mind. Remember who you were before you forgot. Where did this come from? You ask, holding up the amulet. Sam and Dean both stare at it, then at each other. That's not ours, Sam says slowly. Never seen it before in my life, Dean confirms. But he reaches into his own bag and pulls out an identical amulet. Then Sam does the same. You're all holding matching amulets that none of you remember packing. Okay, you say, trying to keep your voice steady. This is officially way above my pay grade. Dean clasps his amulet around his neck. Welcome to the family business, kid. Rule number 1. It always gets weirder. As the three of you prepare to leave the motel room, you catch sight of yourself in the cracked mirror by the door. For just a moment, you could swear you see someone else looking back, a child in colonial dress, with your eyes and a sad smile. And the image is gone, leaving only your reflection and a growing certainty that whatever's waiting in Providence, Kansas, it's been waiting for you specifically for a very long time. Road to Providence stretches out before you like a promise and a threat. And as Dean starts the Impala's engine, you can't shake the feeling that you're driving not just toward a case, but toward a destiny you never knew you had. The Impala purrs like a mechanical panther as it eats up the miles of Kansas highway. You've been driving for 2 hours now, and the landscape has gradually shifted from the familiar sameness of truck stops and chain restaurants to something more unsettling. The farms are too neat, too orderly, as if someone took a picture of rural America and adjusted the contrast until it looked just slightly wrong. Dean has classic rock playing at a volume that probably violates several noise ordinances, but neither Sam nor you complain. There's something comforting about the familiar rhythms of AC/DC and Led Zeppelin, something that helps keep the growing sense of wrongness at bay. A riding shotgun, literally and figuratively, since Dean insisted you keep a sawed-off shotgun loaded with salt rounds within easy reach. Sam sits in the back, laptop open, surrounded by books that smell like leather and secrets. He's been reading steadily since you left the motel, occasionally making notes in a journal that looks suspiciously similar to the one that belonged to their father. Find anything useful? Dean asks, glancing in the rearview mirror. Too much, Sam replies without looking up. Evangeline Morse wasn't just suspected of witchcraft in Salem. According to this account from a Puritan minister named Ezekiel Whitmore, she was one of the most powerful witches in the colonies. The trials weren't about persecution. They were about trying to stop her. Let me guess, you say, watching a scarecrow in a field that seems to be facing the road rather than watching over crops. They failed. Completely. She vanished the night before her execution, along with 13 other accused witches. The next morning, the town of Salem woke up to find every child under the age of 10 had aged a full year overnight. Dean whistles low. Nice trick. Bet the parents loved that. Gets worse, Sam continues. Whitmore wrote that she'd made a pact with something he called the eternal child a-demon that feeds on innocence and youth. Every 25 years, she has to provide it with 7 pure souls, and in return, it grants her continued life and power. You feel the amulet around your neck grow cold. How many cycles has she completed? Sam does some quick math. If she started in Salem in 1692, this would be the 14th cycle. That's 98 children over more than 3 centuries. The number sits in the car like a third passenger, heavy and oppressive. 98 children, 98 families destroyed, and now she's coming for 7 more. There's something else, Sam says, and his voice has taken on that careful tone he uses when he's discovered something particularly bad. The children aren't just killed. According to Whitmore, their innocence is literally harvested. Their bodies are found drained of blood because the blood carries what he calls the essence of unmarked souls. Unmarked, you ask? before they've sinned, before they've been corrupted by the world. Children exist in a state of natural grace until they're old enough to make moral choices. Sam closes the book he's been reading and picks up another one. Evangeline uses that grace to maintain her pact with the demon. But here's the interesting part. Whitmore mentions that she can be stopped, but only by someone who exists between worlds and carries the memory of things that never were. Dean snorts. Well, that's not vague at all. Stupid mystic prophecies never just say, shoot it in the head with silver bullets. Actually, you say slowly, that description kind of sounds like me. I'm literally between worlds, from my reality to yours. And I have memories of things that never happened here. I know about events in your lives that haven't occurred in this timeline. Both brothers go quiet at that. It's been bothering you too, actually. The more you think about it, the more you realize that things here aren't exactly as they were in the show you watched. Small differences, subtle changes that suggest this reality diverged from the one you know somewhere along the way. Maybe that's why she pulled me here, you continue. Maybe she needs someone like me for the ritual, but I'm also the one who can stop her. Double-edged sword, Dean mutters. Story of our lives. As you crest a hill, the town of Providence spreads out below you like something from a Norman Rockwell painting, infected with subtle wrongness. White picket fences, tree-lined streets, a church steeple rising into the late afternoon sky. But the trees are too green for October, the streets too empty for a town of 847 people. And there's something about the way the shadows fall that doesn't quite match the position of the sun. Okay, Dean says, pulling over at a scenic overlook. We need a plan. Can't just drive into Witch Central and wing it. Sam closes his laptop and leans forward. From what I've read, the harvest ritual takes 3 days. First day, she marks the children. Second day, she prepares the binding. Third day, tomorrow night, during the harvest moon, she completes the sacrifice. So we have less than 24 hours to find where she's keeping the kids and stop her, Dean summarizes. Should be fun. You study the town below, and something tugs at your memory. Not from the show, but from those dreams you'd been having. I think I know where she is. Both brothers turn to look at you. In my dreams, there was always a house on the edge of town. Colonial style, white with black shutters, surrounded by a garden that bloomed out of season. And there was a barn behind it, with symbols carved into the doors. Sam flips through John's journal until he finds the map of Providence. Here, he says, pointing to a spot marked in red ink. The original Morse homestead. According to this, the town was built around her property. Of course it was, Dean says. Because why would evil real estate ever be conveniently located somewhere else? As he speaks, your amulet grows so cold it burns against your skin. You pull it out from under your shirt and see that the symbols along its edges are glowing with a faint silver light. Guys, I think my necklace is trying to tell us something. Sam and Dean check their own amulets and find them similarly activated. The glow pulses in a steady rhythm, like a supernatural heartbeat. Proximity sensors, Sam muses. They're reacting to her power, or warning us we're walking into a trap, Dean counters. Before anyone can respond, a child's voice drifts up from the town below, carried on a wind that doesn't touch the trees. It's singing a nursery rhyme in a sweet, high voice. Ring around the roses, a pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes. We all fall down. But the melody is wrong, twisted into something that makes your skin crawl. And as the voice fades, you hear it echoed by other children, then more, until it sounds like an entire chorus of spectral voices, singing from every corner of Providence. The children she's already taken, you realize with growing horror. She keeps them, Their souls, anyway. Dean starts the engine with more force than necessary. Right. That's officially the creepiest thing I've heard today. And considering our conversation, that's saying something. Let's go crash this witch's tea party. As the Impala descends toward Providence, you notice more unsettling details. The streets are indeed empty, but curtains twitch in windows as you pass. Every house has a perfect lawn and a perfectly maintained garden, as if the residents are still taking care of their properties. But you don't see any people. Where is everyone? Sam asks, voicing your thoughts. Maybe they're all inside, Dean suggests. But his tone indicates he doesn't believe it either. Past the town square, where a bronze statue stands surrounded by flower beds that bloom with roses, lilies, and daffodils, all at the same time, impossible for October in Kansas. The statue depicts a woman in colonial dress, beautiful and serene, with a plaque at the base that reads, Evangeline Morse, founder and protector of Providence. Protector, Dean reads, shaking his head. These people have no idea what she really is. But as you continue through the town, you start to see signs of life, if you can call it that. Occasionally, an adult figure will be visible in a yard or through a window, but they move too slowly, too mechanically, like wind-up toys running down. And their faces, when you can glimpse them, are blank and serene in a way that speaks of minds that are no longer entirely their own. She's controlling them, Sam realizes. The whole town, they're her tools. Like a puppet master, you agree. Which means we can't trust anyone we meet here. The amulet's glow intensifies as you near the edge of town. According to the map, the Morse homestead should be just ahead, hidden among a grove of old oak trees that have grown tall enough to screen it from casual view. Dean parks the Impala behind a copse of trees, about a quarter mile from the house. Okay, game plan time. We scout the house, find the kids, figure out how to break whatever spell she's got going, and stop the ritual. Simple. You forgot the part where we don't get killed by a 300-year-old witch, with God knows what kind of power, Sam points out. Details, Dean waves dismissively, then turns serious. Look, you've both been having dreams and visions about this place. That's not a coincidence. Whatever's happening here, you're connected to it in a way we don't understand yet. So when we get in there, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, more wrong than usual, speak up. Nod, checking the various protective charms and weapons Sam insisted you carry. Salt, iron filings, silver knife, wooden stakes, holy water, and a small bag of herbs that smells like rosemary and something sharper. What happens if the ritual is completed? I mean, worst case scenario. Sam and Dean exchange one of their looks, the kind that says they know something they'd rather not share. Eternal child grows stronger, Sam finally answers. According to Whitmore's writings, if Evangeline completes enough cycles, the demon will be able to manifest permanently in our reality. It would essentially become a god of innocence corrupted, feeding off the pure souls of children everywhere. And there would be no way to stop it, Dean adds grimly. So yeah, no pressure or anything. As you prepare to leave the car, you catch sight of the house through the trees, and your blood runs cold. It's exactly as you saw it in your dreams, white clapboard siding, black shutters, a wraparound porch with rocking chairs that move gently in the breeze despite the fact that the air is still. Behind it, the barn looms like a dark promise, its doors indeed carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. It's the garden that really confirms your worst fears. Roses bloom alongside spring tulips and summer sunflowers, all in perfect condition despite the autumn air. And moving among the flower beds like they're tending to plants are 7 small figures in old-fashioned clothing, children, but as you watch, one of them turns toward the road, toward where you're hidden, and smiles. Even from this distance, you can see that her teeth are too sharp, her eyes too bright, and her smile too wide for any human child. These aren't the missing children. These are something else entirely. Changelings, Sam whispers, following your gaze. She's replaced the real children with supernatural doubles. The real ones are probably. A scream cuts through the air, high and terrified, and definitely human. It comes from the direction of the barn. Dean draws his gun. Time's up. Let's go save some kids. The scream echoes through the unnatural quiet of Providence, cutting through the air like a blade through silk. You follow the Winchester brothers as they move with practiced stealth toward the Morse homestead, every sense on high alert. The changeling children in the garden continue their mockery of normal childhood, playing hopscotch and jumping rope with movements that are just slightly too fluid, too perfect, and signals for you to take cover behind a large oak tree whose trunk is wide enough to hide all three of you. From this vantage point, you have a clear view of both the house and the barn. The house itself seems to pulse with malevolent energy, its windows reflecting the late afternoon sun in ways that suggest the glass isn't quite glass anymore. Okay, Dean whispers, here's the plan. Sam, you take the house. Look for spell components, ritual materials, anything that might tell us how to break this thing. I'll take the barn. That's where the screaming came from. What about me, you ask? You're staying here as lookout, Dean says firmly. Like hell I am. The words come out with more force than you intended, but you don't back down. Those children in my dreams, I think I know which one screamed. A little girl with blonde braids, wearing a blue dress. She was always trying to warn me about something. Sam studies your face intently. You think the dreams were more than just visions. You think they were actual contact. I don't know what I think anymore, you admit. But I know I can't just hide while children are suffering. Before Dean can argue, another scream pierces the air, this one definitely from a different child, younger, more frightened. It galvanizes all three of you into action. Fine, Dean says, but you stick with me. And if I tell you to run, you run. Got it? You nod, checking that your protective amulet is clearly visible and your bag of defenses easily accessible. Together, you and Dean begin working your way toward the barn while Sam circles toward the house. As you get closer to the barn, the symbols carved into its doors become more distinct. They're not random markings. They form a complex pattern that seems to shift and writhe when you're not looking directly at it. Your amulet grows so cold it's almost painful, and you can hear Dean cursing under his breath as his own reacts similarly. Sigilla demonum, Dean mutters, recognizing some of the symbols. Demonic seals. This whole barn is basically a supernatural prison. The screaming has stopped, but it's been replaced by something worse. Children's voices singing in harmony. The same twisted nursery rhyme you heard earlier. But now you can make out more verses. Ring around the roses. A pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes. We all fall down. Mother's coming, mother's near. Time for children to disappear. Blood and bone and innocent tears. Feed the hunger of 1,000 years. The voices are coming from inside the barn. Real children's voices, not the artificial perfection of the changelings in the garden. Dean approaches the barn doors, which are secured with a heavy iron chain wrapped around the handles and sealed with what looks like a blob of red wax. As he gets within arm's reach, the wax begins to smoke, and the chain rattles ominously. Sanguis innocentium, vis vidi, custodia mortis. A woman's voice says from directly behind you. You and Dean spin around to find Evangeline Morse, standing not 10 feet away. She's exactly as she appeared in your dreams, and on the television, beautiful in an ageless way, with long dark hair that moves as if underwater and eyes that hold centuries of accumulated knowledge and malice. She wears a simple white dress that might have been fashionable in colonial times, but there's nothing simple about the aura of power that radiates from her like heat from a forge. The blood of innocence, the force of life, the guardian of death, she repeats in English, smiling a smile that's all teeth and terrible warmth. Such lovely words, don't you think? Your father knew them well. Dean raises his gun without hesitation, but when he pulls the trigger, nothing happens. The weapon simply clicks uselessly, as if it's become no more than a piece of metal and wood. Now, Evangeline says, clucking her tongue. That's hardly polite. You're guests in my town, after all. I should extend proper hospitality. He gestures, and Dean staggers backward, as if hit by an invisible force. His gun flies from his hands and lands somewhere in the tall grass. You're early, she continues, her attention turning to you. I wasn't expecting you until moonrise. But then, time moves differently for those who exist between realities, doesn't it? Let the children go, you say, surprised by how steady your voice sounds. I'm who you want, right? That's why you brought me here. Evangeline laughs, and the sound is like silver bells mixed with breaking glass. Oh, my dear child, you understand so little. Yes, I brought you here, but not because I want you, because I need you. There's a difference. Begins walking in a slow circle around you and Dean, and with each step she takes, the world around you becomes more vivid, more real, as if someone has been gradually turning up the contrast, and you're only now noticing. You see, she explains as she walks, the ritual requires 7 innocent souls to feed my patron. But it also requires one soul that exists outside the natural order. A soul that remembers things that never were, dreams of realities that never existed. A soul that can serve as a bridge between the demon's realm and this one. Dean is struggling against whatever force is holding him, his face red with effort. You're not touching them, you psychotic bitch. Such language, Evangeline tuts. And from John Winchester's boy, no less. Your father was much more polite when we met. Dean goes very still. You never met my father. Nye. She stops directly in front of him, close enough that you can see the inhuman depth in her dark eyes. Who do you think told him about Providence? Who do you think led him to that particular case in 1983 that took him away from home just long enough for? He doesn't finish the sentence, but the implication hangs in the air like smoke. The night Mary Winchester died. The night their whole world changed. You're lying, Dean says, but you can hear the uncertainty in his voice. Check your father's journal when you get the chance. November 2nd, 1983. He wrote about a call from a woman in Kansas, mysterious children's disappearances, a pattern that only appeared once every 25 years. Evangeline's smile becomes positively radiant. Of course, by the time he realized it was a trap, he was too far away to help. The pieces click together in your mind with horrible clarity. You arranged for Mary to be alone that night. You made sure Sam would be in that nursery, made sure Yellow Eyes would find him. I merely facilitated certain events, Evangeline says, with a modest shrug. The demon Prince Azazel had his own agenda, but his timing was rather inconvenient for my purposes. I simply ensured that both our needs were met. Dean's struggles against her power become more violent, but it's like watching someone trying to break free of invisible chains. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to. You're going to help me, Evangeline interrupts. Because if you don't, those 7 children in my barn will suffer fates far worse than simple death. And then I'll move on to the next town, and the next, until I have enough power to make my patron manifest permanently. He turns her attention back to you. But you, my dear Bridgewalker, you have a choice. Submit willingly to the ritual. Allow me to use your unique nature to tear open the barrier between worlds, and I'll ensure the children's deaths are quick and painless. Resist, and I'll make their suffering last for days. Barn doors swing open behind her, as if blown by a wind you can't feel. Inside, you can see 7 children huddled together in the center of a complex ritual circle, drawn in what looks like salt mixed with blood. Their ages range from maybe 5 to 12, and they're all wearing the clothes they were taken in, modern jeans and t-shirts that look surreal in the colonial setting. A little girl with blonde braids and the blue dress is among them. She looks up and sees you through the open doorway, and her eyes widen with desperate hope. You, she calls out in a voice raw from screaming. You're the one from the dreams. You said you'd come. Evangeline turns to look at the child with an expression of mild surprise. How interesting. She shouldn't be able to see past the containment circle. Unless she looks back at you with new interest. Unless your connection to her goes deeper than I thought. Let me talk to her, you say. Let me at least say goodbye. How touching, Evangeline says, but she gestures for you to approach the barn. By all means, but remember, the moon rises in less than 6 hours. After that, choice becomes irrelevant. As you walk toward the barn, Dean's voice follows you. Don't do anything stupid. We'll find another way. You're not sure there is another way. The power radiating from Evangeline is unlike anything you've encountered, even in your borrowed knowledge of the supernatural world. She's had centuries to perfect her craft, decades to plan this moment, and the backing of a demon that feeds on the very essence of innocence. You step across the threshold of the barn, and immediately the temperature drops 20 degrees. The walls are covered in symbols similar to those on the doors, but these are carved deeper, filled with a dark substance that gleams wetly in the dim light. 7 smaller circles surround the large central one, each containing restraints that look like they've been used many times before. The children cluster together in the center, holding hands for comfort. Up close, you can see they're all pale and thin, as if their very life force is slowly being drained away. But their eyes are alert and aware Evangeline wants them conscious for whatever she's planning. You're real, the blonde girl says as you kneel at the edge of the circle. I thought maybe I was going crazy. I've been dreaming about you for weeks. What's your name? You ask gently. Emma, she says. Emma Hartley. Are you going to save us? The question hits you like a physical blow. 7 pairs of eyes looking at you with desperate hope, trusting you to make everything all right. You think about Dean's training, about the weapons you carry, about everything you've learned about the supernatural world. None of it seems like enough. I'm going to try, you say, because it's the only honest answer you can give. One of the older boys, maybe 11 or 12, speaks up. She makes us sing for her. Every day at sunset. She says our voices keep the demons happy. He shivers. But there's something else. Something she doesn't know we can see. What do you mean? Emma looks around nervously, then whispers. There's someone else here. A lady in white. She only appears when the witch isn't looking. She tries to help us, but she's not alive. Ghost? Of course there would be a ghost. But who and why here? Before you can ask more questions, Evangeline's voice rings through the barn. Time's up, Bridgewalker. Come away from my prizes. We have preparations to make. You stand slowly, but Emma grabs your hand. Wait, she whispers urgently. The lady in white, she said to tell you, The circle has no power over those who were never meant to be. She said you'd understand. The words hit you like lightning. The circle has no power over those who were never meant to be. You're from another reality entirely, by definition. You were never meant to be in this world, which means the containment circle can't hold you. You look back at Emma and nod slightly, hoping she understands. Then you walk back to where Evangeline and Dean are waiting. Such a touching reunion, Evangeline says. Now then, shall we begin? I have a ritual to prepare, and you have a destiny to fulfill. The sun is setting behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that look entirely too much like fire and blood. In a few hours, the harvest moon will rise, and everything will change. But maybe, just maybe, you found a way to change it first. You glance back at the barn once more and see a figure in white standing just inside the doorway, translucent, shimmering, but definitely there. She nods to you once before fatting away, and in that instant, you know who she is. Mary Winchester, Dean and Sam's mother, still watching over her boys, still fighting the forces that destroyed her family. Now, she's offering to help you save 7 innocent children from the same evil that claimed her life. The pieces of a plan begin forming in your mind. It's desperate, dangerous, and will probably get you killed. But it might just work. You just need to buy enough time for Sam to find what he's looking for in the house, and for Dean to get free of whatever's holding him. All right, you say to Evangeline, trying to sound resigned. What do you need me to do? Evangeline leads you toward the house, her footsteps making no sound on the gravel path, despite her solid appearance. Dean follows behind, still caught in whatever supernatural binding holds him, his face twisted with frustration and rage. As you walk, the changeling children in the garden stop their playing and turn to watch your procession with eyes that gleam like polished obsidian. Preparations have already begun, Evangeline explains conversationally, as if discussing the weather rather than a ritual that will damn 7 innocent souls. I've spent the last 25 years gathering the necessary components. Dragon's blood for the binding circles, salt from the shores of the Dead Sea, iron from meteorites that fell during lunar eclipses, and of course, the most crucial element, a conduit between realities. The front door of the house swings open at her approach, revealing an interior that defies the laws of physics. From outside, the house appeared to be a modest 2-story colonial structure. Inside, the ceiling soars at least 30 feet high, supported by pillars carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. The walls are lined with shelves containing jars, bottles, and containers filled with things that move when they shouldn't and glow with their own inner light. Welcome to my workshop, Evangeline says, with obvious pride. 3 centuries of collected wisdom and power. You try to spot Sam somewhere in the vast space, but the layout seems to shift and change when you're not looking directly at specific areas. Rooms branch off in directions that shouldn't exist. Staircases spiral up and down to levels that the building's exterior couldn't possibly contain. It's like being inside an M.C. Escher drawing brought to life. Space is negotiable when you have the right connections, Evangeline says, noticing your confusion. My patron has certain architectural preferences. At the center of the main room stands an enormous table made from what looks like a single piece of black stone, its surface covered with precise measurements, arcane diagrams, and stains that could be anything from wine to blood. Books lie open across its surface, their pages filled with text in languages you don't recognize and illustrations that seem to move when glimpsed peripherally. Ritual requires careful timing, Evangeline explains, running her fingers over one of the open books. The harvest moon reaches its peak at exactly 11:47 tonight. That gives us approximately 4 hours to complete the preliminary preparations. She waves her hand, and Dean staggers forward as the invisible force propelling him finally releases its grip. He immediately reaches for a weapon, but finds his movements sluggish, as if he's moving through thick honey. Oh, you'll find that my home has certain dampening effects on violent intentions, Evangeline says, with amusement. A necessary precaution when dealing with hunters and their unfortunate tendency toward direct action. Dean opens his mouth to speak, probably to voice exactly what he thinks of her and her dampening effects, but no sound emerges. His eyes widen in alarm as he realizes he's been rendered mute. Much better, Evangeline says. Now then, where has your dear brother gotten to? Samuel, isn't it? Such a scholarly boy. I'm sure he's finding my library quite educational. As if summoned by her words, Sam's voice echoes from somewhere deeper in the house. Exorcism est, omnis emunt spiritus. Evangeline tilts her head, listening. Ah, he's found the binding room. How industrious of him, though I'm afraid his efforts are somewhat misguided. House shudders around you, as if Sam's attempted exorcism is having some effect. But Evangeline doesn't seem concerned. In fact, she looks pleased. You see, she continues, what your brother doesn't understand is that the children aren't possessed. They're marked. The demonic influence isn't in them, it's around them, woven into the very fabric of reality in this place. Standard exorcism rituals are like trying to remove water from the ocean with a teaspoon. Another shudder runs through the house, accompanied by the sound of Sam chanting in Latin. This time, some of the jars on the shelves rattle, and one of the changeling children, visible through the window, stumbles slightly, although, Evangeline admits, he is being rather persistent. No matter. The binding will hold until the ritual is complete. He moves to the black stone table and begins arranging various items. A silver chalice, a blade that looks like it's made from meteoric iron, several bowls containing powders and liquids of different colors, and a crystal orb that pulses with its own internal light. Your role in tonight's ceremony is quite unique, she tells you as she works. As someone who exists between realities, you'll serve as a living bridge, allowing my patron to manifest fully in this dimension. The process will, I'm afraid, be fatal for you, but you'll have the satisfaction of knowing that your death serves a greater purpose. And what purpose is that, you ask, finding your voice at last? Feeding some demon's appetite for innocent souls. Evangeline pauses in her preparations, a slight frown creasing her perfect features. Such a limited perspective. The eternal child doesn't simply feed on innocence, it preserves it. Every soul that joins with my patron becomes part of something pure and beautiful for all eternity. They become free from the corruption and suffering that defines mortal existence. By being murdered, you point out. By being transformed, she corrects. Death is merely a transition, a doorway from one state of being to another. I've spent 3 centuries opening that doorway for those who cannot open it themselves. There's a fervent gleam in her eyes that speaks of absolute conviction. She truly believes what she's saying. In her mind, she's not a child-killing monster. She's a savior, offering eternal innocence to those who would otherwise grow up to face the pain and compromise of adult life, which somehow makes her even more terrifying. The children in the barn, you say. They're scared. They're suffering. How is that preservation of innocence? Temporary discomfort, Evangeline waves dismissively. Fear is part of the mortal condition. Soon, they'll be beyond such petty concerns. Dean Dean makes a strangled sound that might have been a curse if he could actually speak. His hands clench into fists, but when he tries to move toward Evangeline, his body simply won't obey. Your friend seems distressed, Evangeline observes. Perhaps he'd benefit from seeing the truth of what I offer. She picks up the crystal orb and holds it toward Dean. As she does, the surface begins to swirl with cloudy light, and images appear within, not quite solid, but clear enough to make out. The first image shows a young boy, maybe 7 years old, playing in a field of flowers. He's laughing as he chases butterflies, his face bright with pure joy. The scene is idyllic, perfect in every way. This is Michael, Evangeline explains. He joined my patron's realm in 1889. Look how happy he is. Image shifts to show the same boy decades later, except he hasn't aged a day. He's still 7, still playing in the same eternal field, still wearing the same expression of innocent delight. Time has no meaning in my patron's realm, Evangeline continues. Pain, loss, the gradual corruption of growing up, none of these things exist there. Michael has been 7 years old for over a century, and he will remain 7 for all eternity. More images flicker through the orb children of various ages, all frozen in moments of pure joy, all existing in a realm where seasons change, but they remain constant, where games never end, and no one ever grows tired or sad or afraid. A paradise, Evangeline says softly. A place where innocence is preserved forever. You stare at the images, trying to sort out your feelings. There's something beautiful about the eternal playground she's showing you. Something appealing about the idea of a world without pain or loss, or the gradual erosion of wonder that comes with growing up. But there's something wrong with it too. Something fundamentally disturbing about children trapped in eternal childhood, never allowed to grow or change or become more than they are. What about choice, you ask? What about the right to decide for themselves what they want? Children cannot make such choices, Evangeline replies. They lack the experience and wisdom to understand what they would be giving up. I make the choice for them, out of love. That's not love, you say firmly. That's control. That's taking away their fundamental humanity. The orb's images suddenly shift, becoming darker and more chaotic. You see flashes of the children in the barn, huddled together in fear. You see their families, devastated by their disappearances. You see the empty beds and untouched toys and the desperate searching that will never end. You see only the surface, Evangeline says, but her voice has lost some of its calm certainty. You don't understand the larger picture. I understand enough, you reply. I understand that you're so afraid of growing up, of change, of loss, that you're willing to damn innocent children to your own version of purgatory. For the first time since you met her, Evangeline looks genuinely angry. The crystal orb in her hands cracks, sending spiderweb fractures across its surface. You know nothing, she hisses. You've never watched someone you love grow old and die. You've never seen innocence corrupted by the world's cruelty. You've never. He stops abruptly, as if realizing she's revealed more than she intended. When she speaks again, her voice is once more calm and controlled, but you can see the pain lurking beneath the surface. Ritual begins at midnight, she says. Until then, you'll remain here as my guest. He gestures, and invisible bonds wrap around you, holding you in place, just as they've been holding Dean. But as the supernatural restraints settle into place, you feel something unexpected. The amulet around your neck grows warm instead of cold. And for just a moment, the bonds feel loose, uncertain. You were never meant to be in this reality. The magic that works so perfectly on Dean, who belongs here, doesn't quite know what to do with you. Evangeline doesn't seem to notice. She's moved back to her preparations, measuring powders and muttering incantations under her breath. Dean catches your eye and raises an eyebrow questioningly. You give him the slightest of nods, hoping he understands that you might have a way out of this. House shudders again as Sam continues his attempts at exorcism somewhere in its impossible depths. This time, one of the jars on the shelves actually falls and shatters, releasing a puff of green smoke that smells like sulfur and decay. Persistent boy, Evangeline murmurs, but now there's a note of irritation in her voice. Perhaps it's time to give him something more productive to do. She raises her hand, and Sam's voice suddenly cuts off mid-chant. A moment later, he appears in the doorway of the main room, walking with the same mechanical movements that you've seen from the townspeople. His eyes are alert and aware, but his body is no longer under his control. Samuel Winchester, Evangeline says warmly, as if greeting an old friend. So good of you to join us. I trust you found my collection educational. Sam's mouth moves, but like Dean, no sound emerges. His eyes are filled with frustration and something that might be fear. I was just explaining to your friend here about the true nature of my patron's gift, Evangeline continues. Perhaps you'd like to contribute to the discussion. You've always struck me as someone who appreciates the philosophical implications of eternal preservation versus temporal corruption. She waves her hand, and Sam's voice returns. You're insane, he says immediately. What you're doing, it's an abomination. Those children deserve to live their own lives, make their own choices. Choices, Evangeline repeats thoughtfully. Such a precious thing, free will. Tell me, Samuel, given the choice between eternal innocence and a lifetime of gradually increasing darkness, which would you choose for someone you loved? I choose to let them decide for themselves, even if you knew they would suffer, even if you could see the pain and loss and gradual corruption that awaited them. Sam's jaw tightens. Suffering is part of being human. So is joy and love and the chance to make a difference in the world. You don't have the right to take that away from anyone. Rights, Evangeline says dismissively. Another human concept that my patron transcends. In the realm of the eternal child, there are no rights and no wrongs, only eternal bliss. And no growth, you add. No learning, no change, no becoming anything more than what you were at the moment of your death. Exactly, Evangeline says, missing your point entirely. Perfect preservation of the moment of greatest innocence. Outside, the sun has set completely, and the first pale light of the rising moon is visible through the windows. Time is running out, but inside your mind, a plan is forming. You understand now why the mysterious woman in white, Mary Winchester, appeared in the barn. She's been trying to help her sons, but her ghostly nature limits her ability to act directly in the physical world. However, you're not bound by the same limitations. You exist between realities, and that gives you certain advantages that even Evangeline doesn't fully understand. You just need to wait for the right moment. The moon rises, Evangeline observes, moving to the window. Soon, it will be time to begin the final ritual. The children will be prepared, the circle will be activated, and my patron will finally be able to manifest in this reality. And then what? Sam asks. After you've fed 7 children to your demon, what happens to the rest of the world? Evangeline smiles, and for the first time, it's a genuinely happy expression, which makes it all the more chilling. Then childhood itself becomes eternal, she says. Every child born into this world will remain a child forever. Aging will stop at the moment of perfect innocence. Death from old age will become a thing of the past. War, hatred, greed, all the sins that come with adulthood will cease to exist. Because adults will cease to exist, you realize with growing horror. Exactly. Humanity will finally achieve the paradise it lost so long ago. The Garden of Eden restored at last. Dean makes another strangled sound, his eyes wide with the implications of what she's describing. A world of eternal children would be a world without progress, without innovation, without the accumulated wisdom and experience that allows civilization to function. It would be the end of humanity as a thinking, growing species. You're talking about extinction, Sam says quietly. The end of the human race. I'm talking about transformation, Evangeline corrects. Evolution to a higher state of being. The argument is interrupted by a new sound, singing. But this time, it's not coming from the barn or the changeling children in the garden. It's coming from everywhere and nowhere, a chorus of young voices rising in harmony. Mothers here, mothers near, time for darkness to disappear. Blood and bone and silver tears break the chains of mortal years. The very air in the room begins to shimmer, and you can feel something vast and alien pressing against the boundaries of reality, trying to force its way through. My patron grows impatient, Evangeline says, her eyes bright with anticipation. The time has come. She moves to the black stone table and picks up the meteoric iron blade. In the moonlight streaming through the windows, it gleams with an inner fire. The ritual must begin with the spilling of Bridgewalker blood, she explains, approaching you with the knife raised. Just a few drops to open the first seal. Then we'll move to the barn for the main ceremony. This is it. This is your moment. As Evangeline raises the blade, you think of the children huddled in terror in the barn. You think of their families, desperately searching for their missing sons and daughters. You think of Dean and Sam, trapped by magic they can't fight, but refusing to give up hope. And you think of Mary Winchester, still watching over her sons, even in death, still fighting the forces that destroyed her family. The amulet around your neck grows blazing hot, and suddenly you understand exactly what it is and why it appeared in John Winchester's bag. It's not just protection, it's a key to unlocking your true potential as someone who exists between realities. Evangeline's blade descends toward your outstretched palm, but at the last second, you twist away. The supernatural bonds holding you in place snap like cobwebs, powerless against someone who was never meant to exist in this reality in the first place. The blade strikes empty air as you roll aside, coming up with your own weapons. The silver knife Sam gave you, and a bag of consecrated salt. Impossible, Evangeline breathes, staring at the space where you had been restrained. The binding should hold anyone. I'm not just anyone, you tell her, advancing with the silver knife held ready. I'm something you never planned for, something your magic doesn't know how to handle. Behind Evangeline, you can see Dean struggling against his bonds with renewed vigor. Whatever was dampening his abilities seems to be weakening as your resistance disrupts the magical field of the house. You cannot stop what has already begun, Evangeline says, but for the first time, she sounds uncertain. The ritual requires a willing Bridgewalker, you interrupt. That's what your book said, isn't it? The subject must submit willingly to serve as a conduit. Well, I don't submit. I don't consent. And I'm going to make sure you never hurt another child. You throw the bag of consecrated salt in a wide arc, creating a barrier between yourself and Evangeline. Where the salt lands, the floor begins to smoke and hiss, and Evangeline staggers backward with a look of genuine fear. Iron, salt, and silver, you say, advancing step by step. The classic trinity of supernatural protection. And something else. You hold up the glowing amulet, a little gift from John Winchester. I think he's been planning this longer than any of us realized. Evangeline's perfect composure finally cracks. You don't understand what you're doing. Without the ritual, my patron will take its payment in other ways. It will hunt down every child in this town, in this state, until its hunger is satisfied. Then we'll stop it, you say simply. That's what hunters do. House shudders around you as Dean finally breaks free of his restraints, his voice returning in a rush of profanity that would make a sailor blush. Sam is struggling against his own bonds, and you can see them beginning to weaken as well. Inside, the harvest moon reaches its peak, flooding the room with silver light. But instead of empowering Evangeline's ritual, the moonlight seems to strengthen your amulet, making it burn like a star against your chest. The final confrontation is about to begin. The confrontation erupts into chaos as Dean breaks fully free of his supernatural restraints. His gun materializes in his hand. Apparently Evangeline's weapon dampening field only worked while he was bound, and he immediately opens fire. The bullets are salt rounds, each one designed to disrupt supernatural entities, and they strike Evangeline's center mass. He staggers, but doesn't fall. Instead, her form flickers like a candle flame in a strong wind, revealing glimpses of something ancient and terrible beneath her beautiful exterior. For just a moment, you see her true face, withered and aged beyond measure, with eyes like empty sockets and skin like parchment. You cannot kill what has already died a dozen times over, she hisses, her voice now layered with harmonics that suggest multiple speakers. I am beyond your mortal weapons. Sam finally breaks free of his own bonds, immediately diving for his bag of supplies. She's right, he calls out, while pulling out a complex-looking device made of copper wire and crystal. Standard weapons won't work. She's bound herself to the demon. Killing her body won't stop the ritual. House around you begins to respond to the violence, walls bleeding a dark substance that smells like copper and roses. The impossible architecture shifts and rides, stairs flowing like water and doors opening onto rooms that shouldn't exist. Through the windows, you can see the changeling children in the garden standing perfectly still, their heads all turned toward the house, their eyes glowing with reflected moonlight. The binding must be broken at its source, Evangeline says, her form solidifying again as she regains her composure. And I am not the source. I am merely the servant. He raises the meteoric iron blade above her head, and it begins to glow with the same silver light as your amulet. The two sources of power seem to resonate with each other, creating a harmonic frequency that makes the air itself vibrate. Children in the barn, she continues. They are the true anchors, each one tied to my patron by bonds of fear and desperation. Even if you destroy me, the ritual will continue. My patron will claim them one by one until the connection is complete. Then we cut the bonds, you say, understanding flooding through you. The dreams, the visions, Emma's ability to see you, they were never about you being the key to the ritual. They were about you being the key to stopping it. The iron knife cuts through magical bonds, Sam says, holding up a blade similar to Evangeline's, but smaller and clearly crafted for a different purpose. But someone has to get close enough to the children, too. His words are cut off as the house suddenly lurches, as if it's trying to shake itself apart. Through the windows, you can see the barn beginning to glow with an eerie light, and the sound of children's voices rises in a desperate, terrified chorus. Mater malignantium, veni ad nos. Sanguine innocentium, veni ad nos. Evangeline begins chanting in Latin, her voice growing stronger with each repetition. Eternal child, master of preserved souls, accept this offering and grant us your presence. The very air crackles with power as something vast. An alien begins forcing its way into reality. You can feel it like pressure in your ears, a presence so immense and wrong that your mind rebels against acknowledging it. We have to get to the barn, Dean says. But even as he speaks, the front door slams shut and refuses to budge despite his efforts to force it open. The windows, too, have become solid barriers, as if the house itself has become a prison. The binding circle, Sam realizes. The whole property is one giant containment circle. She's not just keeping the children trapped, she's keeping us here until the ritual is complete. Evangeline laughs, a sound like breaking crystal. Did you think I would make the same mistakes as lesser practitioners? I have had centuries to perfect my craft. Every contingency has been planned for. But as she speaks, your amulet pulses with increasing intensity, and you begin to understand something that Evangeline clearly doesn't. The binding circle may be holding the Winchesters, who belong in this reality, but you're not bound by the same rules. Sam, you call out, pulling the silver knife from your belt. You said someone needs to get close enough to cut the bonds holding the children. What if that someone doesn't have to go through the house? Understanding dawns in Sam's eyes. You can phase through the barriers, your nature as something between realities. Impossible, Evangeline interrupts, but there's uncertainty in her voice. No one can breach my defenses. No one from this reality, you agree. But I was never meant to be here in the first place. Without waiting for further discussion, you stride toward the nearest wall. As you approach, you can feel the defensive magic pushing against you, trying to keep you inside. But just as with the restraints, the spells seem confused by your presence, uncertain how to categorize something that shouldn't exist. You place your hand against the wall and push. For a moment, resistance. Then, like passing through thick honey, you feel yourself moving through solid matter. Impossible, Evangeline shrieks, abandoning her ritual chanting. The boundaries cannot be breached, but you're already through, standing in the garden among the motionless changeling children. They turn to watch you with their inhuman eyes, but make no move to stop you. Perhaps they can't. Perhaps their purpose is only to maintain the illusion of normalcy, not to act as guards. Behind you, in the house, you can hear the sounds of battle resuming. Dean's gun fires repeatedly, and Sam's voice rises in counterchants designed to disrupt Evangeline's ritual. But the true battle will be won or lost in the barn, where 7 terrified children wait for salvation or damnation. Run across the garden, past flower beds that bloom in impossible seasonal combinations, past a sundial that shows midnight despite the bright moonlight. The barn looms ahead, its walls now glowing so brightly that the carved symbols are clearly visible even from a distance. As you approach, the temperature drops dramatically. Your breath forms clouds in the suddenly frigid air, and frost begins forming on the grass around your feet. The voices of the children are clearer now, not the twisted nursery rhymes Evangeline forced them to sing, but desperate prayers and calls for help. Please, you hear Emma's voice clearly. Please, someone help us. It's coming. The thing in the shadows is coming, and we can't stop it. Reach the barn doors, which now stand wide open despite being chained shut earlier. The interior is a scene from a nightmare. The 7 children huddle in the center of their circle, but now they're not alone. Shadows move around them, not ordinary shadows, but living darkness that reaches toward the children with grasping tendrils. Above the circle, something is manifesting. It's difficult to look at directly. Your eyes want to slide away. Your mind wants to deny what you're seeing. But you force yourself to observe, to understand. Eternal child is not what you expected. It's not some cute, innocent-looking being preserved in youth. It's a writhing mass of shadow and silver light, constantly shifting between forms, now resembling a child's silhouette, now something with too many arms and faces that melt and reform like wax. It radiates a hunger, so intense it's almost physical, a need that has grown over centuries until it's become an addiction. Real children cower beneath this abomination, their faces pale with terror. But Emma, brave little Emma, looks up and sees you standing in the doorway. You came, she whispers, and her voice carries enough hope to break your heart. Manifestation above turns toward you at the sound of her voice, and suddenly you're looking into dozens of eyes that hold millennia of corrupted innocence. When it speaks, its voice is a chorus of children who never grew up, but not by choice, by force, by imprisonment, by the gradual erosion of everything that made them human. Another soul for the collection, it says, and the words seem to come from everywhere at once. So long since we tasted one from between the worlds. So long since such sweetness graced our realm. I'm not here to join your collection, you say, raising the silver knife. The blade catches the moonlight streaming through the barn's open doors and reflects it back in a brilliant flash. I'm here to free these children. The entity laughs, and the sound is like wind chimes made from children's bones. Free. There's no freedom from paradise. There's no escape from eternal joy. They belong to us now, as you soon shall. The shadows around the circle intensify, reaching eagerly toward you. But as they make contact with your skin, they recoil as if burned. Your amulet is now blazing like a miniature sun, and the silver knife in your hand hums with harmonic resonance. I'm not from your reality, you tell the entity, stepping into the circle. The moment your feet cross the boundary, the symbols carved into the floor begin to crack and blacken. I'm not bound by your rules. You move toward the children, and with each step, the circle's power weakens. The shadows writhe and hiss, trying to stop you, but they can't seem to find purchase on someone who exists between worlds. Emma reaches out to you, and when your hands touch, light explodes between you. Not painful light, but warm and clean and real, the kind of light that exists in the moment between sleeping and waking, between childhood and adulthood, between one reality and another. What are you? The entity shrieks, its form becoming more unstable as its connection to this reality wavers. I'm someone who remembers what innocence really means, you answer, pulling Emma to her feet. And it's not this. It's not eternal imprisonment disguised as paradise. It's the freedom to grow, to change, to become who you're meant to be. Raise the silver knife and bring it down on the restraints binding Emma to the circle. The moment the blade makes contact, the magical chains shatter like glass, and Emma staggers free. 1 down, 6 to go. But the entity isn't going to let you continue unchallenged. With a sound like reality tearing, it begins to descend toward the circle, abandoning its attempt at subtle manifestation in favor of direct intervention. If we cannot have them willingly, we'll take them by force, it declares. And you, Bridgewalker, you will serve as the anchor that binds us permanently to this realm. The shadows in the barn coalesce into solid tendrils, wrapping around your arms and legs, trying to drag you upward toward the descending entity. But as they touch your amulet, they begin to smoke and dissolve, unable to maintain their grip on something that doesn't truly belong in this reality. You continue moving through the circle, cutting the bonds of each child in turn. With every freed soul, the entity grows weaker, its its form becoming more translucent and unstable. The barn itself begins to shake and groan, as if the very foundations of the spell are crumbling. Inside, you can hear the sounds of the battle in the house intensifying. Evangeline's voice rises in increasingly desperate chants, trying to maintain her connection to her patron, even as that connection weakens. Dean's gunfire is joined by the sound of splintering wood and breaking glass, and Sam's counterchants grow stronger and more confident. You cannot stop what has already begun, the entity insists, but its voice is weaker now, less certain. The pact is sealed. The children are ours. The pact was based on consent, you reply, freeing the fourth child, a boy of perhaps 8, who immediately runs to Emma's side. But children can't consent to something they don't understand. And your servant lied to them about what they were agreeing to. The 5th child freed. Then the 6th. Only one remains, a little girl who can't be more than 5, too frightened to move from where she huddles in the center of the rapidly disintegrating circle. Wait, the entity says, and for the first time, its voice holds something other than hunger and arrogance. You do not understand. Without the sacrifice, without the preserved innocence, childhood itself dies in this world. Is that what you want? A reality where innocence exists only briefly before being crushed by the weight of adult responsibility and pain. Pause, the knife halfway to the final set of bonds. The question hits harder than you expected. Isn't there something appealing about the idea of preserving innocence, of protecting children from the harsh realities of growing up? But then you look at the 6 children who are now free, and you see something the entity doesn't or refuses to acknowledge. Yes, they've been terrified. Yes, they've seen horrors no child should see. But they're not broken. They're resilient. They're adapting, surviving, growing stronger. That's what real innocence is. Not the absence of knowledge or experience, but the ability to face darkness and still believe in light. Innocence isn't something you preserve in a jar, you say, cutting the final bonds. It's something you nurture and protect while still allowing it to grow. Last child tumbles free, and the circle collapses entirely. The entity above lets out a shriek that sounds like every nightmare you've ever had combined into one terrible sound. And then it begins to fade, its connection to this reality severed. This is not over, it whispers as it dissolves. There are other servants, other packs. The hunger remains. And there are people who will fight it, you reply. There always have been. Barn is suddenly quiet, except for the sound of 7 children breathing heavily, and the distant battle in the house, which seems to be winding down. The symbols carved into the walls and floor are now nothing more than harmless scratches, and the oppressive atmosphere that hung over the place like a shroud has lifted. Emma tugs on your sleeve. What about the witch? What about her? Before you can answer, the barn doors explode outward as Dean and Sam burst through, looking slightly singed but victorious. Dean's eyes quickly sweep the barn, taking in the freed children and the absence of the supernatural entity. Everyone okay? He asks. We're okay, Emma answers for all of them. The scary lady and her shadow monster are gone. Not gone, Sam corrects grimly. Evangeline got away when her connection to the demon was severed, but her power is broken. The townspeople should start returning to normal, and the children are safe. For now, you add, remembering the entity's final words. Dean nods. There's always another threat, another monster. But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight, these kids get to go home to their families. As if summoned by his words, you hear the sound of vehicles approaching, multiple cars and trucks converging on the property. Through the barn's open doors, you can see headlights cutting through the darkness. Police, Sam explains, and probably some very worried parents. I may have made a few anonymous calls while Dean was keeping Evangeline busy. Next hour passes in a blur of activity. Parents reuniting with children, police asking questions that get carefully edited answers, paramedics checking everyone for injuries. The changeling children in the garden have reverted to simple scarecrows and lawn ornaments, no longer animated by supernatural force, who stand apart from the chaos, watching as Emma hugs her parents with fierce intensity. She looks over their shoulders at you and mouths, "Thank you," before being swept away to the safety of home and family. So, Dean says, appearing beside you with a beer that he definitely didn't have a few minutes ago. What happens now? You saved the day, the kids are safe, and the witch is on the run. Where does that leave you? It's a good question. You're still in a reality that isn't your own, still wearing an amulet that belongs to someone else, still carrying memories of a life that may or may not exist anymore. I don't know, you admit. I guess I figure it out as I go. Sam joins you, offering a beer of his own. You know, you fought like a hunter tonight, like someone born to this life. Maybe there's a reason you ended up here. Maybe you agree, looking up at the harvest moon, which now seems gentle and benign rather than threatening. Or maybe I just got lucky. In my experience, Dean says, there's no such thing as luck. Only preparation meeting opportunity. Is that a Dean Winchester original? Nah, I stole it from someone else. But it sounds good, doesn't it? Laugh, surprising yourself. After everything that's happened, the terror, the confrontation, the weight of 7 children's lives in your hands, you can still laugh. Maybe that's what innocence really is. Not the absence of experience, but the ability to find joy, even after witnessing darkness. As the last of the police cars pulls away, leaving you alone with the Winchester brothers in the quiet Kansas night, you realize something. You're not the same person who woke up in that motel room. You've changed, grown, become something new. Maybe that's what growing up really means. Not losing your innocence, but transforming it into something stronger and more resilient. The amulet around your neck has cooled to a comfortable temperature, but it still holds a subtle warmth that suggests your connection to this world is far from severed. Whatever brought you here, whoever orchestrated these events, might not be finished with you yet, but that's okay. You've learned something important tonight. Sometimes the most important battles aren't fought with weapons or magic, but with the simple determination to protect those who can't protect themselves. In a world full of supernatural threats and ancient evils, that might be the most powerful magic of all. 3 weeks later, you're sitting in a diner somewhere in Nebraska, watching Dean demolish a slice of pie that's probably violating several laws of physics with its sheer size. Sam has his laptop open beside his coffee cup, researching the next case, and you're learning that life as a hunter involves a lot more driving and a lot less dramatic confrontations than you'd expected. So, Dean says around a mouthful of apple pie, any weird dreams lately? Visions of ancient evils, mysterious phone calls from beyond. Nothing, you admit. It's been surprisingly normal. Normal's good, Sam says, without looking up from his screen. Normal means we're between apocalypses. Been traveling with the Winchester brothers since that night in Providence, partly because you still don't know how to get back to your own reality, and partly because, if you're being honest, you're not sure you want to. This world is dangerous and often terrifying, but it's also real in a way your old life never felt. Every day brings new challenges, new people to save, new reasons to keep fighting. The amulet still hangs around your neck, though it's been quiet since Providence. Sometimes You catch Sam looking at it thoughtfully, and you know he's trying to figure out its true purpose. Dean, for his part, has stopped asking questions about where you came from and started focusing on where you're going. Got something, Sam announces, turning his laptop so you can see the screen. Cattle mutilations in Wyoming. Classic signs of. He's interrupted by the diner's television, suddenly turning itself up to full volume. All three of you go instantly alert. After Providence, random electronic disturbances make everyone nervous. But instead of news about mysterious deaths or supernatural phenomena, the screen shows a talk show. The host is interviewing a woman you recognize immediately, despite the professional makeup and expensive clothes. Evangeline Morse sits in the guest chair, looking every inch the best-selling author she apparently now is. The chyron at the bottom of the screen reads, Dr. Evangeline Morse, child psychology expert and author of Preserving Innocence, a parent's guide to protecting childhood. It is hiding in plain sight. You breathe, staring at the screen. The importance of shielding children from the harsh realities of the adult world, Evangeline is saying to the host. Children should be allowed to remain children for as long as possible. Too much exposure to mature themes can damage their developing psyche permanently, and her book has been a bestseller for 3 weeks running. The host responds. Dr. Morris, what do you say to critics who argue that children need to learn about the real world gradually? Evangeline's smile is perfect, warm, and completely terrifying when you know what lies behind it. Those critics simply don't understand how precious and fragile innocence really is. Given the choice between protection and exposure, any loving parent would choose protection. Dean reaches for the remote to change the channel, but you stop him. Wait, listen. I've actually started a foundation, Evangeline continues, called the Eternal Childhood Project. We're working to create safe spaces where children can exist without the pressures and corruption of modern society. Imagine entire communities dedicated to preserving the wonder and joy of youth. Your blood runs cold. She's not just hiding, she's recruiting, building a new network, finding new ways to justify her actions under the guise of child psychology and parental protection. Turn it off, Sam says quietly. We know where she is now. That's what matters. Dean clicks the TV off, but the damage is already done. The reminder that Evangeline is still out there, still pursuing her twisted vision of eternal childhood, hangs over the table like a storm cloud. So what do, you ask? Call the cops, expose her somehow. With what evidence? Sam asks. That she's a 300-year-old witch who tried to sacrifice children to a demon. They'd lock us up. We watch, Dean says firmly. We wait. We research her foundation and see if any kids go missing from the communities she's targeting. And when she makes her move, because she will make her move, we'll be ready. You nod, understanding that this is how the hunter's life works. The threats are never truly eliminated, only postponed. Evil adapts, finds new forms, new disguises. But so does good. And as long as there are people willing to stand against the darkness, there's hope. She made one mistake, you point out. She let me live. She let all of us live. And she has no idea what we learned about her during that ritual. What did we learn? Sam asks, genuinely curious. You think back to that moment in the barn when you cut through the final bonds, when the entity was fatting and desperate. She's not immortal. She's sustained by her pact with the demon, but that pact can be broken. And without it, she's just a very old woman with a lot of knowledge and a serious psychological disorder. Useful information, Dean agrees. File it under things to remember when we inevitably face her again. Waitress comes by to refill coffee cups. and normal conversation resumes. Sam closes his laptop and pulls out a road atlas, tracing potential routes to Wyoming. Dean orders another slice of pie, claiming he needs to maintain his strength for the coming battle against supernatural bovine mutilators. You sit back and watch them work, marveling at how naturally they've accepted you into their world. They've never pressed you for details about your past that you couldn't give, never made you feel like an outsider despite your unusual origins. In their eyes, what matters isn't where you came from, but what you choose to do with the life you have now. Inside the diner, a family with young children walks by the window. The kids are laughing and playing, their parents watching with expressions of tired love and patient supervision. Normal people living normal lives, unaware of the supernatural dangers that lurk in the shadows. That's what you're protecting, you realize. Not just the dramatic confrontations and world-ending threats, but these quiet moments of ordinary happiness. The right of children to grow up gradually, to learn about the world at their own pace, to become themselves, rather than remaining frozen in artificial innocence. Ready to hit the road? Dean asks, standing and leaving money on the table. Ready, you confirm, following them toward the door. As you walk past the family outside, one of the children, a little girl with blonde braids, looks up and waves at you. For just a moment, your heart skips, thinking of Emma. But this is a different child, living her own life, growing up in her own time. You wave back, and she giggles before running to catch up with her parents. That's what innocence really looks like, you think. Not preservation in amber, but the freedom to grow and change and become. It's messy and unpredictable, and sometimes painful, but it's real. Dean starts the Impala, and classic rock fills the air as you pull out of the parking lot. The road stretches ahead, leading to Wyoming and whatever new mysteries await there. Behind you, the diner grows smaller in the distance, just another stop on an endless journey. So, Sam says from the back seat, anyone else wondering what would have happened if the ritual had succeeded? If Evangeline had actually managed to stop aging permanently? Nope, Dean says firmly. That's a rabbit hole I'm not going down. Some things are better left as hypotheticals. Lean back in your seat, watching the landscape roll by. Sam's question is interesting from a philosophical standpoint. But Dean's right, some possibilities are too terrible to contemplate seriously. Besides, you have other things to think about. Like the fact that your amulet has started warming up again as you drive west, suggesting that your adventures in this reality are far from over. There are still mysteries to solve, people to save, evils to fight. Maybe, somewhere down the road, answers about why you were brought here and what you're meant to accomplish. But that's tomorrow's concern. Today, you're exactly where you need to be riding shotgun with the Winchester brothers, heading toward whatever comes next, ready to face whatever darkness threatens the light. The Impala carries you down the highway, and in the distance, storm clouds gather on the horizon. But for now, the sun is shining, the music is loud, and the road ahead is full of possibilities. In your experience, that's about as close to a happy ending as you get in the hunting business. And honestly, that's enough. 6 months later, newspaper headlines across the country report the mysterious disappearance of Dr. Evangeline Morse and the sudden collapse of the Eternal Childhood Project. Investigators find no evidence of financial irregularities or criminal activity. She simply vanished one night, along with all records of her foundation's activities. Last confirmed sighting places her in a small town in Montana, where she was reportedly seen talking to a group of children at a local playground. The children later told their parents they met a nice lady who wanted to play games forever, but had decided they'd rather go home to their families instead. Local authorities found evidence of a brief struggle in the woods outside town, scorch marks on trees, patches of ground where nothing will grow, and 3 sets of footprints leading away from a circle of salt. No bodies were ever found. In a motel room 3 states away, you pack the last of your belongings into a duffel bag that's seen too many towns and too many fights. The silver amulet catches the light as you tuck it beneath your shirt, still warm against your skin, still holding secrets you're only beginning to understand. It calls from the parking lot. Wheels up in 5 minutes. Sam found us a case in Oregon, spontaneous combustion with a side of poltergeist activity. You check the room one last time, making sure you haven't left anything behind. On the nightstand, your phone buzzes with a text message from an unknown number. Thank you for showing me what growing up really means. The nice lady is gone now, and we're all safe. Emma and the other kids want to say hi when you're back in Kansas. Mrs. Hartley. You smile, pocketing the phone. Some stories, it seems, really do have happy endings. Inside, the Impala's engine rumbles to life, and Dean has already started the music. Sam waves at you from the passenger seat, a new case file open on his lap, and that familiar look of determined focus in his eyes. You throw your bag in the trunk and slide into the back seat. The car pulls out of the motel parking lot and onto the highway, carrying you toward Oregon and whatever supernatural mystery awaits there. Behind you, the town shrinks in the distance. Ahead, the road stretches endlessly onward, full of promise and peril in equal measure. You've learned a lot since that morning you woke up in a strange motel room in a reality that wasn't your own. You've learned that innocence isn't something you lose, but something you choose to carry with you as you grow. You've learned that family isn't always about blood, and that home isn't always a place. Most importantly, you've learned that sometimes the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in service to others. Hunting life is dangerous, unpredictable, and often thankless. But it's also purposeful in a way your old life never was. Every person saved, every evil defeated, every child who gets to grow up safely, it all matters. And in a world where so much seems meaningless, having something that matters is everything. The Impala carries you into the sunset, toward whatever comes next, and you're ready for it all.